Welcome to the podcast Life After Addiction and Indictment. I'm your host, Steve Cloward, and I spent most of the last decade and well over $100,000 on coaches, consultants, masterminds, and events trying to figure out how to reclaim my life again. On this podcast, I'm going to share the tools, the tips, the tricks, and the hacks that allowed me to forgive myself so that I could reclaim my life again. I'll be interviewing experts in mindset, leadership, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, branding, and so much more. I'm glad you're here. Sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Let's go! This is Life After Addiction and Indictment.
Welcome back to Life After Addiction and Indictment. Today I've got a gentleman joining me by the name of John Jarman. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I appreciate your time and look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it as well. It's nice to, I've done a few of these, and so it's nice to meet people and see the differences in their shows and just, have a good conversation and, help some people out. So
to me, that's what it's all about, man.
Yep.
If this will just help just one person, it's worth it to me. I've been doing this 2.5 years and I'm starting to get a lot more serious about it. Meaning I didn't, I usually haven't really done anything really to promote it or anything, but when you find something that fulfills you versus something that you do just to make a living,
right,
totally different animal.
Absolutely.
And there can be days, in fact, I'll be honest to you and the audience, today is one of those days where I'm just struggling because I'm very tired. I have a bit of a headache, and it's one of those things that oftentimes, in fact, I'll be honest, I just 10 minutes ago said, man, I wish I didn't have this one scheduled today. But every time that happens, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, as soon as I get started, everything changes, man.
Well, I'm going to make you feel better, a little bit better, Steve. So 5:30 this morning, I walk out of my house to go to work, and my driver's side front tire was stolen off my car, and my car was sitting on a jack. And I'm like,
they put it on a jack and just
and they left it there. And I'm like, why do you steal just one tire? And I'm thinking that they got somebody startled them and they took off. But that's the way my day started. And then the tow truck, and I told my insurance company, I said, make sure you tell the tow company I don't have a front tire.
Yeah,
they took the lug nuts, so I couldn't even put my spare on. And so the tow truck shows up, and it's a flatbed tow truck.
I know how that works.
But I didn't have a tire. They couldn't put me on there.
So want to talk about a crazy story. It's been about a year ago. My wife had just dropped off her folks, and they're in their 89 and 84 years.
Uh-huh.
And I'll make this quick, but she's driving an Audi Q7, and she calls me one day, and she is hysterical. She had just dropped them off at their home and was coming down the hill, and the back left tire of that vehicle fell off and started rolling down the road.
Oh my gosh.
So she immediately went to the worst case scenario, of course, that, they had been on the freeway coming back from Salt Lake City. What if it had fallen off then,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And anyway, so I rush up there and, long story short, she'd only had it a few months and Les Schwab actually put on different tires and wheels. And luckily, my buddy of mine's a dealer who I bought the car from. And he actually accused Les Schwab, which I was like, how are we going to get them to cover anything? Because we can't prove that it was anything to do with them.
Right.
But the bolts, 3 of the bolts had sheared off. They were still screwed in and then just sheared. So I figured it had to be. But anyway, to their credit, which I'm not a fan of theirs, to be honest, even prior to this situation, they actually did research and found that there was a lot of lugs, including when we bought ours, that they had some defect.
Oh, wow.
So, it could have been so much worse. So talk about grateful.
Right.
But to the tow truck situation, the guy, he jacked it up enough and then it was probably a 4x4. It wasn't a 2x4, where he pulled it up, and he'd drag it with the winch and then move another piece in front. And anyway, it was crazy to watch, but he pulled it off. I was pretty impressed. But
the tow truck drivers are pretty creative. So
man, that's a terrible way to start your morning.
Yeah, that was my Tuesday morning. So,
well, man,
but I'm still smiling,
that's such a great lesson though, because, and I've said this many times on this show, is when I was in prison, I had a lady who was a friend of my parents. I'd never met her, and she wrote me a letter, and She said, I don't know what it'd be like to be in there, and I'm not going to pretend to. But if you could think of 3 things to be grateful for at the end of the day, each day, I promise you it will have a powerful impact.
Oh, that's nice.
And I'll tell you what, and I was struggling. This was still early on, and I was pretty down still. And that shifted everything, because when you're in a state of gratitude or thinking about it, and you just cannot be sad, depressed. I mean, it just changed everything.
The one thing I always say is no matter how bad we have it, there's other people that have it a lot worse than you and I.
Bingo.
Brother. And it's just, and we have to keep that in mind when things like this happen. I mean, because, it's, the tornadoes in the Midwest right now, that's nothing. Crazy. That's nothing to my tire being stolen, It's
perspective, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
true.
And I think that, when you've freed yourself from your past, and you found the freedom of all the stuff that you've been through, whatever trauma or whatever it was, and you see the world a little differently. And I think it helps you see stuff like that and understand that perspective. So
that's so true. Well, let's get into it then. Let's talk a little bit about, your backstory. Kind of tell us a little bit how you grew up and kind of how your life evolved.
So I grew up in a very violent, my dad was an alcoholic and very violent. And so I don't have a lot of memory up until age 12. So, at age 12, I walked down the hall and grabbed a knife and told him if he didn't quit beating my mom, I would kill him. And he left that day. And so I didn't have a lot of contact with him up until, I joined the Marine Corps. But, from the time he left, it was my mom and three brothers and I trying to survive.
By the way, thank you for your service, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So, 4 boys and a single mom. So, and so, we all, it's late 70s, early 80s. And, we all got involved in the drugs and stuff like that and the partying. And I was selling drugs at the time. And from the time I was probably 15 till I joined the Marine Corps in 87 when I was 23 and, using everything but heroin. And so, but then, one night I was at a party and I looked around and I said, there's got to be more to life than this. And it was New Year's Eve of 1987. And I got up, walked out of the party. 2 days later, I walked into a Marine recruiting office and I said, how fast can you get me out of here? He goes, did you commit a crime? And I said, yes, but I've never been caught. And so he said, well, let's talk. And so we went down the plethora of things that I did. And so, I had to sign a drug waiver and everything. And 2 months later, I was standing on the yellow footprints in San Diego. And looking back on it now, that's, that saved my life because I probably would have been dead or in jail had I stayed in that situation. But I was fortunate, and, and I look back on it now where I am in my faith walk, and that was God leading me, even though I didn't know anything about God. And so, and then, Marine Corps, served 4.5 years in the Marine Corps, went to college, got a master's of physical education, started teaching, coaching high school football. And, I did it to try to keep kids from doing what I did, because
that's so cool. I mean,
fatherless kids are tough because, they don't have any male leadership and, they put a lot on their shoulders and, I lost both my older brothers passed away. And I believe it was in conjunction with the drug use, and my little brother's still battling a hard alcohol addiction. He was a meth addict. Matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, he just relapsed and, was in 72-hour detainment for suicide watch. And so, it's been, addiction's been in my life a long time. And, luckily I avoided it. I got out of it. And, by the grace of God, I'm don't use it anymore. And
was it just at that party stuff? I mean, you mentioned that you just thought there had to be something better.
Yeah.
I mean, was there anything in particular that triggered that thought?
I can't, I was sitting there and I was like, man, this is, I've been doing this for a long time and there's got to be something better than this. And I just got up and walked out and never touched it again, Steve. I didn't need counseling then. What I needed counseling for was in my adult
all the trauma
and everything like that. And it took me 10 years to get through that. And so, 10 years off and on with a counselor. And then I had found a spiritual mentor about halfway through. And the two of them are what really set me free from, the trauma and the shame and the guilt and all that stuff that goes along with being a victim of abuse. So,
wow. I think that's something that most people probably don't understand that haven't been around that. Not only what it does to an individual, but how many people actually experience it. I think it's way harder than most people would even imagine.
Well, I think it's a silent disease because people don't let people know. I mean,
Yeah.
my brother, if you met him during his addiction, if you met him when he wasn't using, or there was a time where he was sober, he's one of the greatest guys to be around. But then
Yeah.
then he starts using, and it's a different
Changes everything.
personality.
Yeah.
And so and that's what I told him this last time. I said, because he's like, I want to talk to you. I said, Jason, you can talk to me when you're sober, because talking to drunk Jason's not fun.
Yeah.
But that's his story. So, but he's working on getting free, and I'll share this cool part. So the guy I used to run around with in that time span before the Marine Corps, we reconnected. We hadn't seen each other since I left for the Marine Corps.
Wow.
And we reconnected this past Saturday in person. And he's sober for 11 years. He's working on a degree to be a drug counselor.
That is awesome.
You would have never guessed that out of this guy.
Have you both been still up in the same area that you grew up in?
Well,
how did you reconnect?
I lived away from here for about 18 years coaching, and then I moved back up here. But when I'd come back up, I'd ask about him, and they were like, John, you don't want to be around him. He's using so much, and he's just, he's not the same person. And, then when I moved back this time, it was about the time I released the book. He saw it on Facebook, and he reached out to me through Facebook, and we started talking, and we were going to go to, lunch or something, but we never had, he was busy, I was busy, kind of thing. And I was doing a book event this weekend, and him and another buddy from high school will come walking up to the booth. I didn't even recognize him,
I'll bet, yeah. I know what that's like.
I was just like, my God, and I'm sitting, and it was like we'd never been apart, because we
That's
virtually
cool.
did everything together, and all the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And and to see us both where we're at now, it's
That
amazing.
had to be a hell of a reunion. That's cool.
Yeah. So,
Wow. Well, it's two things I want to ask you about your book.
mhm,
First thing, because obviously my podcast is focused on helping those who have been through trials and situations, addiction, whatever, prison, traumas, whatever, to kind of reclaim their life through entrepreneurship. And
mhm.
a book, from a marketing standpoint and credibility, can do a lot of things for somebody, to give them credibility right out of the gate, to help them in, their business, depending on what they're doing, obviously.
Right.
So would you mind sharing a little bit about how the process you went through in writing a book took place, and, kind of just the process, I guess, overall?
Well, here the process actually started in 2014 when Christina, my counselor, said, John, you need to write a book.
Yeah.
And I kind of laughed at her because, my story, like I said, people have had worse childhoods than I am. I'm not going to, say no one's had anything worse or least than me, but it's my story. And, so I shared it with a few friends. I said, this is what my counselor said, here's part of my story. And they're like, yeah, John, you need to write a book.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going, all right, I failed English in high school. I have dyslexia. I'm a Marine and a PE teacher. I'm not a writer.
I hear you.
So what I did is I found a lady that was going to my church, and she did a lot of writing for the church. And so she helped me outline the book, and I got through 5 chapters, and then, it just didn't feel right I didn't know where to go in the book.
Yeah.
And so I put the book on the shelf, and it wasn't until February of 2021. Nope, 22.
Wow.
February 22 is when 21, sorry. It's the Holy Spirit in my morning prayer time. I came across Hebrews 10:36, and says, when you're doing the will of God, you must persevere to get what he promised. And then about an hour later, in the morning, I do cardio, and I listen to worship music, and I read, and I read other authors and stuff. And so A.J. Swoboda is one of my favorite authors, and his very first book is called Messy. And so in his book, he said, no one told me if anybody would read my book or buy my book. I just had to write it. Well, those two things happened within about an hour of each other. And so I just looked up,
Wow.
and I said, okay,
I get it.
I got to get it done.
I hear you. Yeah.
But before that, and the reason why I didn't know where to go with the book is that, I didn't have the faith that I have now. I didn't have the deep meaning of the word. And as I worked with Scotty, my spiritual mentor, I wanted to know more about the word. So I enrolled in seminary. I'm 8 hours shy of a master's of theology because I wanted to get a deeper meaning of the word. So I think that was all preparation for the book. And I'm not saying you need to do that to write a book, but that's
I love it. Yeah, I hear you.
And so I started, so I made a commitment. I was going to the Gulf of Mexico on vacation that February. And so I made a commitment. I'd get up in the morning and write for 2 hours in the morning because, sunrise at the Gulf of Mexico, inspirational.
Oh,
So I went down, I was there for 7 days. I wrote for 2 hours every day. I came back, I kept doing that. The book was literally done in 4 weeks.
Wow.
So it was just a spiritual dump. And I tell people, I was the vehicle for the words to go on the paper, but the words came from him. And so then I finished the book and I was looking, okay, how do I get it published now? Or do I do self-publishing? And so I called my spiritual mentor and I said, hey, do you know an editor? Because I needed editing because of the dyslexia.
Yeah.
And so he referred me to a friend of his that served in prayer ministry with him. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, this is the girl, because she's going to understand the story and the prayer and the faith-based part of the book. So we're working together. We've been working together about 2 months. And she goes, John, I want you to know I'm a scout for Morgan James Publishing in New York. And she goes, based on what I've seen, they're going to sign you. They're going to sign you. And I'm like,
no way.
Okay. And so we get done. We're almost done with the book, and she submitted the manuscript to the publisher because they always want it submitted before it's completely done. And in September, I got a letter from Morgan James accepting me to the family. And so so this is February to September of 2021. And then last March of 2022, I had 500 copies of the book in my hand. And it's going to be, tomorrow is actually the first anniversary of the book launching on ebooks, the ebook.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So it's been out for 1 year as of tomorrow.
Is it on Audible by chance too? Or
no, it's not on Audible yet. I get a lot of requests for that, and I'm discussing that with the publisher because I get so many requests, but they're saying that I have to sell a certain number of books before they do the Audible. And I'm like, well, if you get the Audible out, I'll sell a bunch.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so that's how the book came about.
That's
and
incredible.
And I look at it and I obeyed that morning. I obeyed, and God made it happen, and because you don't get that quickly, I think, without divine intervention. And it's just been, if you'd have told me in 2015 that I would be doing podcasts and preaching the gospel and talking about all this stuff, I would have laughed at you because it wasn't even on my mind,
Right.
And I completely surrendered to God in 2016 is when so growing up the way I did, I was in control of my life, and I did not want to let that go. In my early faith walk, I kept saying, God, it's John's timing still. I want it in my timing, and you know how that turns out.
Oh, yeah.
And so the control aspect was the hardest part to give up. And it's the pride and it's the ego, because I had big pride, I had big ego because the way I grew up and, things I got away with. And
hell, I still fight that every day.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, I think it's the hardest for men, the pride, and it's the hardest for men and being humble. But I think when you humble yourself at the cross and you let go of your pride and become vulnerable to be able to look inside yourself and perform that self-examination, then that's when the veil removes and you start seeing things differently. And it's just been an amazing 2 years, and I just look forward to see where it takes me, because I love what I do right now. And the book is saved. I had a young lady who was 2 years behind me in high school, so I really didn't know her in high school. She saw the book and she got it on Kindle. She read it, and then she sent me a message on Facebook and said, John, just want you to know your book saved my life. I was contemplating suicide, and I found your book and I read it. And so I've been discipling her for about 6 months, and she is so fired up for the Lord now. And
that is so cool.
And that right there, the book has been a success.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. That story alone was worth everything to get you. I mean, and then just sharing your story.
I had a Marine who bought the book, and he wrote a review on Kindle, and he said he was struggling with his faith. And after reading my book, it brought him back to the faith, to a deeper place in his faith walk too. And so those two stories right there, I mean, when the young lady wrote me, I was crying when I read the message.
Oh, I'll bet.
So,
I mean, just hearing what you've said so far and the way that it evolved and the timing that it did, there was no accidents in any of that.
Right.
I mean, the chances of connecting with the gal you did through your spiritual mentor, I mean, there's no accidents there,
I used to say coincidence, but there's now I call them God things. In my book, I use the term God things, and that's what I call them. So
no doubt about it. That is great. Well, speaking of that, because I believe with what's going on in the world right now, we're truly in biblical times. And I think also that, it's a time for us to be, I feel like America in particular, obviously the rest of the world, but I think America in particular has really lost their way.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's time for us to reawaken and to put God back as the forefront and centerpiece of not only our lives, but every area.
Everything. And that's what I loved about the revival in Kentucky this year. Because I think that's that I wish it would have caught fire and spread a little more.
Yeah.
We've lost our I was watching the State of the Union this year, and above this podium that Mr. Biden was speaking on, it said, "In God we trust." And I thought, and I paused my TV and took a picture and I posted on Facebook and I said, when are we going to get back to this?
Yeah.
Because we don't trust God anymore in
Not at all.
And
we do everything we can to push him out of
exactly.
everything.
And I tell a lot of people on these podcasts that our Christian First Amendment right is being taken away from us because it's hard for us to talk biblically. Because if we do, we're called homophobes, we're called this, we're called that, and it's being taken away from us. And if we mention that we're a Christian, they don't want to talk to us. And so it's and then I follow that up with, well, Jesus did say we'd be persecuted in his name. So,
well, I mean, not to get into political, because I have a podcast for that too, but, it's pretty interesting to me. You don't have to like Trump at all, but I don't know of very many men that have been persecuted the way he has.
Right.
Like, love or hate him is irrelevant. It's not a political thing.
Right.
He's been more persecuted, including to this moment today.
Correct.
Totally ridiculous. Which, you got to ask yourself why, but it's obviously evil coming up against something.
Right.
And people that have things to hide, or there's no reason for it,
Right.
But it's an interesting time. And I think that's so cool, your story, and how the book came about. But, I know from a standpoint of addicts and even just struggling in life,
Right.
I've got a couple, in one of my business, I've got a major challenge right now. And this morning was one of those mornings that got me on my knees in a way that I've rarely been on, in such an intense, humble way,
Right.
And I've talked about two predictions.
I remember those. I remember those days when I owned my own business. So
yeah. When there's things that are out of your control, but it does affect you big time. It's just brutal. And whether it's that, whether you're in addiction, early in sobriety and having a bad day, or just having a bad day, period, whatever, that pride. And I was so guilty of it, and I still am to this day, but prior to my, going to prison and, having that self and, really that inner reflection and looking that man in the mirror, that happened pretty quickly. All of a sudden you're finding yourself in prison.
Right.
Place I never thought I'd be in my lifetime. And I still seems like a dream to me to this day, honestly. But when you have that time to reflect, you realize I had always thought Steve had the answers. I always, could do it on my own. And why do we complicate it? We got someone that'll always be there if we'll just reach out.
Right.
And, as I mentioned to you, but right when we started, while my son had been up in the area that you're in, Washington, to me,
Course creators, say goodbye to intimidating software and eliminate multiple subscriptions and say hello to Backbone. Backbone helps course creators thrive with their all-in-one, easy-to-use sales and marketing platform. Backbone gives you all your automation in one place to capture, nurture, and turn more leads into customers. With Backbone, you get unlimited courses, membership sites, funnels, landing pages, surveys, and forms with our easy-to-use drag-and-drop features. That's not all. Backbone provides a full CRM and pipeline management, two-way SMS, workflow automations, call tracking, full analytics, built-in AI, 24/7 support, and so much more. Stop paying for multiple tools and put more money in your pocket with Backbone. Just go to backbonelms.io now to get your free 14-day trial. Backbone supports letthemlive.org to help defend the defenseless by donating 5% of each subscription every month. Jump over to backbonelms.io now to start your free trial today.
It's about a spiritual journey, a one-on-one spiritual journey with the Savior. And we can lose that oftentimes even in religions who are Christian religions.
Right.
And I've, as I mentioned, I grew up in a religion for 47 years of my life. And the last 3 years have been most amazing from a spiritual standpoint.
Right. Yeah. I don't like to
always fought for.
I don't like to use the term religion. I like to use the term relationship because it's a personal relationship. And,
Excellent.
A.W. Tozer, do you know who A.W. Tozer is?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
He was a theologian in the 50s, 60s.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
The one quote, I opened my book with this quote. It says, "When God finds you, you will be alone."
Oh, amen to that. Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yep.
What a great quote.
Yeah. And so it's just, and
That's
it's true.
great.
It's
Well,
true, and
it is.
then AJ Swoboda, this is I'll address this to the addicts and anybody in your audience, because this quote really sank home with me to the point where it's on my landing page on my website. Okay. And it says, "God created us without our consent. He will not save us without our permission. We have to want to be saved and healed."
Wow.
And when I read that, I went, that's so true and honest.
Yeah.
And for an addict, they have to want that saved, and they have to want to be healed, because if they don't want that, they're just going to keep using. And that's one of my brother's problems, I think, is,
Absolutely.
and when you truly want that saving and healing, man, it opens up the whole door. And that's why I reached out to Christina, because when I moved back home, I started seeing some self-destructive behaviors start to happen. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I got on the phone book. I called 2 counselors. They weren't taking patients. She took me, and we worked together for, on and off for 10 years. And, I walked out of her office one day, and it was probably 2017, I believe. I walked out of her office, and sat in my car, and I felt like I had the weight of the world lifted off me. I went back in. I said, "I'm not coming back." She goes, "What do you mean?"
Wow.
I said, "I'm free." I said, "I'm free."
Wow.
And I haven't had one of those, shameful or guiltful, there were days when I grew up, when I was in my worst times, that I didn't like to look at the mirror because I didn't like the person I saw. And
Right.
now I can look in the mirror, and, so, she and Scotty, freed me of all that stuff. And I pray for my brother to have that, because he grew up in the same household I did.
Yeah.
And we've had talks about that, but, it's just a battle for him. His battle's stronger than mine was.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I'll be here for him, and, I'll pray for him. So
That's the tough part. I mean, you're doing the right thing. Even what you mentioned earlier, where, you reached out and you said you don't, you really don't want to engage with that
right.
one that's using,
Right,
and that's
right.
true. And that's so hard,
Yep.
When you're dealing with a loved one, but it is the only thing you can do. And that's actually doing him a favor.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
and Scotty gave me the best advice he could. He goes, "John," he goes, "you got to remember one thing. God loves your brother more than you do. And
Amen.
he's going to take care of him. And eventually he's going to wake Jason up." He goes, "So just keep praying that God's will be done." And when he said that, I was like, wow, God loves him more than I do. So,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
he's watching over him. So,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
Wow, man, you've got an incredible story. For
Thank you.
those that are listening, and I'm not looking for anything personal, but I think that shame and that guilt and there's still a stigma around counseling, I believe. And
absolutely.
I think that's pathetic, frankly, because, I've said this many times in my show. I'm going to say it again, because probably everyone doesn't listen to every show, but my dad used to always say, why is it that we take better care of our cars by changing their oil every 3,000 to 5,000, but we never go in and do it, get a checkup from the neck up is what he would call it, and it's, why don't we? I mean, it's because there's a stigma around it, which I personally think is,
So
potentially.
Steve, I'll share this story. My older brother, he grew up in this same thing. He was a drug addict, and he had to quit because he contracted hepatitis from needles.
Yeah.
And I said, "Steve, you need to get into this." Is when I moved back up here. I said, "Steve, you need to get in some counseling." He goes, "I don't want to go." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because people will think I'm crazy." And I looked at him and I said, "You are crazy, man.
Yeah.
We're all crazy." Okay.
That's the key right there. We all are.
Yeah, we're all a little bit crazy.
We all have issues.
So, but he never did. He never went to counseling because of that stigma, and I'm like, "Steve, you don't have to tell people you're going to counseling."
Exactly.
And I said, and this is for your listeners too. This is what I told them. I said, counseling is a safe place. It's where one person, you can say anything you want and you won't be judged. And they're going to give a different light to how you're feeling and what you're thinking. They're going to turn it a little bit so you can see it from a different perspective. And that's the good thing about counseling, is because you can say whatever you want and there's no judgment at all.
Yeah.
And it's going to be tough. I call it peeling the onion away, because you get to the center of the onion, it starts stinking more.
Pretty raw.
And so, it's going to be tough. There's going to be days you're going to walk out of that room and you're going to be mentally and physically drained. And there were days I didn't go back to work after counseling sessions because
you felt like you got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to be willing to do the work, and you have to want it. And that's why I love AJ's quote so much, is because you have to want to be saved and healed. And and for the people that might still be using that, or listening to your show, or trying to get off, that's what I would understand, that you are loved no matter what you've done. Okay. So you have people that love you, whether it's family members. You might not think they love you because of your addiction, but they do.
Yeah.
And so go get that counseling, lay down your pride, lay down your humility, and go get healed. And because when you're free, and I'm speaking from experience, when you get free, your life changes. I mean, it's amazing. And you've experienced it, Steve, so you know what I'm talking about. And, but it's hard because of that sinful nature of our lives. So
I remember leaving.
That's what I wanted to share this. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I saw this Hebrews verse the other day, and I thought it'd be perfect for your show. So it's Hebrews 12:4. It says, in your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood.
Wow.
Hebrews 12:4.
12:4. That's perspective.
Okay. But think about it. How hard have you tried to fight against that addiction or whatever your sin is,
Yep.
I mean, and when I read that, and I've read it before, but it hit me the other day. Because it was Monday morning, I believe. And, we had a confusion on the dates. So I was like, oh, that's perfect for his show. So I'm going to save it.
Wow. Well, remember that Hebrews 12:4. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, speak two things I wanted to bring up that you brought up is, getting vulnerable, and it's a choice if you want to grow and improve and become free, frankly.
Correct.
And, for any of the listeners that haven't listened to this, I haven't gone back and listened to it because I'm a little afraid to, but it was an episode I did with Lion Goodman, and it was episode 110 that came out February 27th of this year. And he goes through some things that help you release triggers that you've had in your life. He's got a very unique way that's incredibly effective. And he was kind of talking about how the process worked and asked me to close my eyes, start visualizing. And when we got to that part, I said, I know where this is going. Now, he wasn't trying to take me there without me knowing or anything.
Right.
But I was willing to do it.
Right.
Even on this show, because like we talked about, if it helped one person, I'm doing it.
Right.
And it was one of those situations I thought was resolved, but obviously it's not. Having to do with my father, and I had a great dad. I was never abused or anything.
Right.
And I was bawling. And just like I said, I felt like I got run over by a truck when we were done,
Yep.
But to me, it's worth it because I am willing. I've been through enough, we're a little bit older, both of us. And, for whatever reason, it takes life, it takes experience to realize you finally get to the point you don't give a shit about what other people think.
Right. Right.
And I'd be lying if I said I'm perfect with that. I'm not.
Oh, no, neither.
I still get caught up in that. Yeah.
I'm not perfect either, trust me.
But the point is, we have to own it and realize it and be willing. And the bottom line is, I'm looking to be a better person so that I can be a better friend. I can be a better father. I can be just a better person that can impact the world in a better way, that I can have a better, connection with, what I call God. And that's what it's about. And whatever that takes, I'm willing to do, even if it sucks sometimes,
Right. Well, it goes back to that pride. And I think when you think that you can handle it.
Absolutely.
You know that.
Absolutely.
And you think I can give it up anytime, I can do it on my own. Those are all common threads that addicts say. And that's your pride talking to you. And, and when you let that pride go and say, I need help, and you go get it, that's the first step of vulnerability. And I think that's why I said, I think it's harder for men to do than women, because we're supposed to be the strong, we're supposed to be this, we're supposed to be that. But the one thing I learned in me surrendering was that by becoming vulnerable and surrendering, I became stronger.
So true.
And it's like Paul says, it's like the Apostle Paul, for when I'm weak, I am strong.
Yep.
Okay. And you have to become the weakness that he's talking about is you understanding what you said earlier, that you're not perfect, that you do have problems, that you are going to make mistakes. And if you understand those, then the mistakes lessen. I tell people now, because I still sin, but I sin less.
Yep.
Is what I tell them, because because you could start seeing what caused those, and now you know how to change your behavior so you don't do them again.
Bingo. Yeah, I remember the pride really getting to me as I left outpatient rehab one night. There was one of the days of the week was family could come. So my parents came, my wife always came. And this particular time, my dad came, my parents, and I was walking the parking lot with my dad, and we were just talking. He said something, I can't remember how it came up, but it was about, you've been praying at all. And I said, no, why would I? He's not going to listen to me. I mean, that right there shows you the guilt and the shame and how it can really mess up your thought process.
Right.
Because as a father of 5, 4 boys and a girl, there is nothing that any of those kids could do that they couldn't contact me and me not be there for it.
Right.
And the love that the Lord has for us, can't even comprehend. So that is the most silly thought that I was having.
Well, and that's one thing that people struggle with. They said they think I got to get cleaned up before I go to Jesus. And no, he will.
You need him to help you.
So 𝐂𝐻𝐿 Swoboda said in that book, Messy, he said your life will become messier when you meet Jesus, because you're going to start seeing the trend, that self-examination that I talked about.
Yeah.
But and when people say that to me, I say, well, that would be like being sick and saying you're going to get healthy before you go to a doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
As crazy as that.
I have a broken arm, but I'm going to let it heal before I go to the doctor.
What a great analogy.
And that's what I tell people. I said, because you're sick. That's when Jesus came to the world, that's who he came to save, is the sick.
Yeah.
If you look at his ministry of the 3 years he was on earth, he sat with the lepers, he sat with the sick, he sat with all the people that other people shunned.
Yeah.
Those are who he came to save. So
So
and we're part of that,
Absolutely.
So, yep.
Well, that's really cool. So your book's taken off. I mean, that was quite the experience. What, are you doing any book tours or?
I do pretty much podcast tours. I just talked to a young lady who I'm probably going to hire to give me some more speaking gigs, because, I have a day job and it's tough for me during the day to reach out to people and try to set things up. So I need somebody that can do it for me.
Yeah.
And so, once I get that set up, then, I'll start doing some more speaking tours. The funny thing about the book industry is the paper book is kind of almost obsolete with Audibles and Kindles and stuff like that. And so, but people do still appreciate a signed book. And so if you want a copy of my book signed, go to my website and you can click a little button and it'll say sign the book, and I'll sign it and ship it to them. If you order off of Amazon or anything like that, it won't be signed. But the book's available anywhere in the world. It's worldwide. I actually sold 2 books in Poland and 1 in Germany.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. So it's, and the thing about it is it's so surreal to understand that, I'm going to touch people and I won't even know how I touched them.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
That's the cool part of it. And the book's, the book's done really good. It's got a couple really good reviews from literary titans gave me a 5-star review. Goodreads gave me a 4 out of 4 stars. And so,
That's awesome.
that made me feel really good. And, it's just, we'll see where God takes me,
Yeah, no kidding. That's what's cool.
Yep.
What's kind of one of the most important things in developing a true relationship with God? Because, that's something that I struggled with for a long time.
Well, for me, having been mentored by 𝐒𝐭𝐲, that's the key, is you have to find somebody that's more mature in Christ than you.
Yeah.
That you can use as a mentor. And then you need to have daily prayer and reading time. And I do that every morning still. Been doing it since I met Scotty. And without that, because, I tell people, you got to talk, you got to have prayer time. And people go, well, God knows what you say before you say it. Well, yeah, but he wants to hear you say it.
Of course.
know, and you got to get into the word, because he's got to speak to you through the word. And,
Yeah.
you know, just like that verse this morning on Monday morning, Hebrews 12:4,
Oh, for you.
you know, I'm reading and I just went, oh my gosh,
Jumped off the page.
that's right there for this podcast, you
Yeah.
know. And so that word, it's a living word, and it truly is a living word, because you can read it over and over, and sometimes the verse won't even speak to you. You go back, read it, because you're in a different situation, and it's going to speak totally to you, and you're going to go, wow.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that, and then, you know, you have to have people around you that are faith-based, you know, because you know the old saying, you surround yourself with good people and you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so you have to have that network, and you know, that's the key to me, is that prayer, reading, and having a mentor, because you're going to, especially if you're a younger Christian or younger believer, because you're not going to understand the text and you're going to have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And you need to have that person that you can go to and ask the questions. And, you know, by the grace of God, I had Scotty. So
That's cool. Well, here's one. I'll share what an AA sponsor told me. I went to AA even though I was an opiate addict, but I want to ask you this question first. With whatever you're comfortable sharing, and I think there's nothing really big deal about this question, but when you talk to God or pray to God, what does your prayer look like? Just an overall, because I know growing up in religion, it's outlined how to pray. And I remember talking to this AA sponsor of mine. He was an older gentleman. He's long passed, but I remember him telling me, why do you try to speak to him in a different way than you'd speak to me?
Correct.
He expects you to talk to him like you talk to me.
Yep.
Says if you're having one of those days and you got to drop the F-bomb, then you drop the F-bomb. You know,
exactly.
Says just speak your authentic, true self.
Yep.
That really changed things.
I mean, it says biblically that God is slow to anger, so he has anger as an emotion. And if he created us in his image, then we have anger.
Yeah.
Right?
He understands this.
Yeah, he understands it. And he wants the honesty. And, you know, the formal prayer, I'll share this. This is what we use to teach new believers how to pray. And Scotty taught me it, and it's called TACO's prayer, and it's an acronym. So you start with thanksgiving.
Yep.
Then you use adoration, then you confess, and then you pray for others, and then you pray for yourself. And you use that order, but it's conversational style.
Yeah.
And so when we're in our disciple group where we have more than, you know, just two people, one person takes T, one person takes A. And so it teaches that person how to pray aloud. Because I'm talking working with new believers, because some believers are afraid to pray aloud.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we use that to teach that. And so somebody will take T, somebody will take A, somebody will take C, somebody will take others. And before we start, we always ask if there's any prayer concerns, because when we get to others, we want to pray for the group. And then we pray for ourselves. And so it's a cool way to get people started. It's super simple. It's easy to remember. And, you know, I'm like you, I agree with that old man at the AA meeting. It's a conversation, you know, you just talk, but here's the thing. It's a conversation. So you have to listen.
That is the critical piece.
So during my prayer, I always ask this question. I say, God, what do you want me to pray for? And then I sit, okay? And I just listen. And sometimes thoughts come, sometimes nothing. But I always ask, and if nothing comes, then I say, God, is there anything on your heart that I can pray for, that you want me to pray for? You know, the tornado victims came to mind this morning when I asked that question, you know? So, I mean, it's just that little piece that I added changed my prayer life, because that's me wanting to, and so I start to get that. Yeah. So
I haven't heard that. I love that.
Yeah. Please steal it. Go ahead.
I'm going to.
But you got to sit and you got to listen. You know,
the key.
And that's the hard part for some people, because I think people think they're so busy they don't have time for that. You know, and I always ask people,
I find that damn part every day.
How long do you pray for when you pray?
Me?
Yeah.
This morning was 25 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. And I'm not
saying
not
normal.
Yeah, and that's about me too. I'm not saying everybody needs to do that.
Yeah.
But you have to at least one day a week have a long prayer time. I mean, think about this. When Jesus was in Gethsemane, he said, stay watch, I'm going to go pray. He was gone an hour. He come back, and what did he say to the disciples? You can't stay awake for an hour. Okay. So, and I'm not saying you have to pray for an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
But you need that 10, 15 minutes of solid prayer time. And now a couple of it can be you sitting and listening Just
Yeah.
sit in quiet. So when I pray, I light a candle, I put on some really low volume worship music like Mercy Me, Jeremy Kemp. And
That's
I like
cool.
to have that music in the background, and I turn it on very low so it's not too disturbing. And I'm in total darkness other than the candle.
Yep.
And so that sets the mood for it. And I just go until I'm done. So
I love that, because I mean, you're setting the mood, really kind of invite that spirit to,
yep.
Be there.
Yep.
That's
Because
very
I
cool.
then I do this at 3:45 every morning. And on the weekends, I do it usually around 6:30 because I sleep it. That's sleeping in for me.
Yeah.
And people are always like, how do you get through the day? And I'm like, I give God that time. He gives me the strength.
Bingo.
So, and if I don't do that, my day doesn't
Hell.
go the same.
Yeah.
So,
No doubt.
and
Okay.
one of the things I always pray for too, Steve, is I always pray for God to place somebody in front of me that day that needs to hear the word.
That's cool.
Because I want to be, if there's somebody that I come in contact with, show me if that person is hurting or whatever, and so I can speak some word into them. So,
Dude, man, I'm just grateful to have met you and to have you here
yeah,
today.
well, I appreciate it.
This is
So
bad.
here's the thing I just add. So
Uh-huh.
I ask God to let me see the world through his eyes, let me hear the world through his ears, and let me speak to the world through his words. And that's something I just added to my prayer life, and it's awesome. So
That's cool.
so
Yeah, because like I said, hearing some of this stuff is really, I mean, it's been powerful for me, because
Well, I
like I
appreciate
said,
that.
the last 3 years, I've really been focused on that spiritual connection and that journey, and to getting other people's perspective is huge,
Yeah.
because I still, as much as I hate to admit it, I still have a whole ton of stuff inside of me from 45 plus years of religion in the way
Right,
to do things. And it's so different. And frankly,
No,
it's
it's
so
just-
ineffective compared
a-
to what's going
it's
to
a-
happen.
I call it a relationship. It's like your relationship with your wife.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you talk to her about anything, you talk, and you guys just sit and talk. There's no
Yep.
judgment on either one of your parts. And if you let's say that you were the only one doing the talking.
Yeah.
She doesn't talk back. That would be a tough relationship.
Yeah.
So if we don't have that with God, how are we going to have a relationship?
So
And so
true.
that's the best analogy I can think of for that relationship that we want to have. So
Yep. And I'm the perfect example for those listening that, I fought doing this and learning these things because I wasn't, number one, making it a priority and doing it. But then I was never, ever being still and quiet. It's like, whether you're a business owner or not has nothing to do with it. If you don't
Correct.
ever get yourself in a space to be quiet, whether it's, communication or, inspiration you're looking for from God or just life in general, you're never going to notice it.
Yep.
So it's crazy. Well, man, so I've obviously got all your information, website information, things that'll be in the show notes, but tell folks where they can find you, what your website is, and then any last words you want to leave.
Okay. My website's brokenandredeemed.com. I'm on all social medias. It's Twitter, Instagram, you can find me, it's Facebook. And then, the last thing I guess I would tell your listeners is I go back to what I said earlier in the show, lay down your pride, raise your hand, ask somebody to help you, whether it's a spiritual counselor or a mental health counselor, your best friend to help you get those things, and understand no matter how bad your situation is or how addicted you are, people love you and you're worth the saving. Don't ever think that you're not worthy of it, and go get the help to get over it. So
Amen.
that's what I would leave them. So,
well, that's fantastic. Well, again, John, thanks for your time, and I look forward to, staying in touch. And I'm
absolutely.
going to order your book and start digging into that myself. So,
well, I tell you what, I'll send you a PDF copy of it so you don't have to pay for it. So,
dude, that'd be great if you will, but I'm going to pay for one, and I'm gonna get a signed copy. So,
okay.
but send me the PDF, because then I'll get after it right away.
You'll get after it right away. So I'll
Yeah.
send that to you later. I'll probably send it to you tomorrow. So,
Okay, that'd be cool.
yeah.
The last thing, folks, I want to leave you with, today's sponsor is Backbone. For those that are course creators, say goodbye to intimidating e-learning software. Backbone helps course creators thrive with their all-in-one, easy-to-use sales and marketing platform. Just go to backbonelms.io. That's backbonelms.io. All right, John. Well, thanks again, buddy. And appreciate your insights and time, man. It's been cool.
Thank you for having me on. I've loved the conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.